characteristics. By reading and studying the Gospel of Matthew, we pick up some things that Matthew learned and described from his perspective, as one with the spiritual gift of giving. A desire to give quietly without public notice. Matthew 2:11. On coming to the house, they saw the child and his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, and of incense, and of myrrh. Now, they are coming to the house. This is the Magi, not the we three kings. We get a lesson on that, probably a lot more than three. But they came to give gifts to the baby Jesus. Except here he was a child, and they came to a house probably several months afterwards. They didn't come with trumpets, proclaiming the streets, showing we're going to give gold, frankincense, and myrrh. No, they came to a house quietly and presented their gifts. They didn't do it publicly. They were humble. A desire to give quietly without public notice. Matthew 6:1-4. Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward for your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by men. I tell you the truth, they have received the reward in full. But when you give to the needy, notice the when, not if. When you give to the needy, it says it twice in that same verse. When you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be done in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So be humble when you give. Do it quietly without public notice. Number 2 characteristic of the spiritual gift of giving. A motivation to give as unto the Lord at His prompting, not at man's appeal. A motivation to give unto the Lord at His prompting. That requires maybe a little explanation. There'll be times where there'll be an outreach at the church. I can think of an example actually in our church here. And there are times when I know that we're supposed to give to that. And I'll go home and talk with Sue, and it wasn't that long ago. We talked about the amount to give, and it was the same amount. Way more than I would have normally thought. But that's what God wanted us to do. Another campaign came up at church here. Maybe I had pizza the night before, whatever, but I didn't get that feeling. That was one that I still might have given it to him, but it was not one the Lord was prompting us to do. Didn't have that warm pleasant. Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, when moths and rust destroy, and when thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You heard that verse, think of that young man in the video. Bless his heart, nothing wrong with having a flat A and a neat shirt, going to the front seat of jellyfish, or whatever that rock refuse want with. But make sure the things you store up are going to have a true investment value later on down the road. You still learn that lesson. Number 3, a desire to give gifts which are of high quality. High quality. Characteristics of giving, spiritual giving. Matthew 26:6-10. When Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of a woman known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. You all remember that verse. John, the Apostle John, in verse 12:3, suggested that alabaster jar and his perfume that he used was worth approximately 1 year's salary for a working man. So it was very, very expensive. 1 year's salary for a working man is what that perfume cost. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She's done a beautiful thing for me. Somebody with the gift of spiritual giving gives gifts of high quality. Now, a number of you in this room are volunteers and work at Kansas City Rescue Mission. At Kansas City Rescue Mission, in fact, a lot of you also work at Hope Network here. I can't speak for Hope Network. My wife works here for that, but I don't know if this illustration applies to that. But I know at Kansas City Rescue Mission, we get donations of clothing, we get donations of canned goods, food, which we really all need, and of course some cash. But, some of the clothing is kind of old, maybe it's in bad repair, maybe it even needs to be washed. But it's worth a tax deduction. We get more beets, spinach, and sauerkraut than you could possibly imagine. The guys are only going to eat so much beets, spinach, and sauerkraut, and We appreciate it all, but corn or beans or something would be nice once in a while. Giving gifts is high quality. All right, number 4, characters, the ability to test faithfulness and wisdom by how people handle their gifts. An important one. Matthew 18:23-35. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Now, we're going to look at talents in a couple of verses, but in the Old Testament, a talent is a measure of weight. In the New Testament, it's like coinage. So you see that word talent, it doesn't mean the same thing, whether it's the Old or New Testament. But in this situation, the servant owed the king 10,000 talents. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient, he said. I'll pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let it go. Well, as I told you, a talent is actually 75 to 95 pounds. And it may be a talent of gold, it could be a talent of silver, it could be a talent of lead. We don't know. It all depends. If this was a king, it doesn't say in this example, but I'm guessing it was something like silver or gold. Okay. To get an idea of the size of the indebtedness this man had, David donated 3,000 talents of gold and 7,000 talents of silver for the construction of the temple in 1 Chronicles 29:47. This man's indebtedness could not possibly be covered by selling his family into slavery. The top price you get for a Samson slave was 1 talent. Normally, a slave went for a tenth of that price, average with a little bit of a step. Got a tenth of a talent. So there's no way that 10,000 talents was going to cover that debt. Not even close. In addition, if this was the year Jubilee coming up, the year Jubilee, is the year at the end of 7 cycles of 7. The year following 7 cycles of 7. 7 times 7 is 49. So the year following 7 cycles of 7 is the Jubilee year. And all slaves were released, and land went back to its original owner. So even if these guys were sold, based on what year it was, they might have been released before too long anyway. No way you could pay that back. In this parable, the servant begs for time and promises to pay back everything that he owed, an impossibility. So the master takes pity, cancels the indebtedness, and decides to look on the loss as a bad loan rather than an embezzlement, which is very well may have been. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. A denarii is 1 day's wage. So 100 denarii would be 100 days' wages. That was what he was owed. He grabbed him by the neck and choked him. Pay back what you owe me. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient, we'll pay you back. But he refused. He went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay his debt. Now remember, he was a servant of the king. He took a fellow servant for the king and threw him in for his indebtedness. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. The master called the first servant in. You wicked servant. I canceled all your debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servants just as I had on you? In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. Verse 35, Jesus says, this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. From your heart. Strong lesson. Characteristic number 5, a tendency to practice personal frugality. The ability to be content with the basic necessities of life. Learning to be content with what you have. Wow, that is so tough. The tendency to practice personal frugality, ability to be content with basic necessities of life, learning to be content with what you have. Now, I've got somebody I know really well that, bless his heart, he and his wife are there. They have a new car, they have a great pickup truck, he's got a boat, he's got an RV, he's got a motorcycle, he has no debt. He pays things off. But he's got all these things, and he's never quite happy with what he's got. He's always needing something else. What's the next thing? Now, he doesn't go into debt to get them. I want to emphasize that. But he's never happy with what God's given him. He's never content. I already asked Soup, I didn't use this example because it's personal. In our house, I never know what we're going to have to eat next week. Soup plans her menus, I'm lucky. Sue's an excellent cook. But I never know what the menu's going to be next week. Because she waits until she gets the coupons from the grocery store. And based on what those coupons are, what's on sale, that's what she buys, and that's what our menu's going to be for the following week. That's great. You know, I see somebody smiling. She's not the only one that does that. Our son said the other day, "Don't you guys ever buy anything that's not on sale?" And no, we generally don't. If it's on sale, hey, you know, we try to make that money that God gives us go as far as possible. But a tendency to practice personal frugality, ability to be content with what you have. Mark chapter 12 says, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. A poor widow came, put in 2 small copper coins, worth only a fraction of a penny. Calling his disciples, he said, "I tell you the truth. This poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she out of her poverty put in everything, all that she had to live on." You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be wealthy to have the spiritual gift of giving. 6, and alert us to see what other people do with their money. Matthew 25:24. Dan has talked about this it wasn't all that long ago, this parable. And this is one you know. In fact, I'm going to touch upon the highlights. Again, it was like a man who went on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to him. He gave one 5 talents of money, another 2 talents, and another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. Now, prior to this parable, and right after this parable, Jesus was talking to his disciples. He was talking about heaven. He talked about heaven and the bridesmaids and lanterns before this parable, and he talked about heaven right after this parable. And Dan has put this in perspective. I think this is a great lesson. Now, we're in the New Testament. We're talking about talents. Remember what I said it was? It's not weight. It's what? Coinage. Coins. So, a talent was used for coinage. 1 talent is worth 6,000 denarii. 1 talent is worth 6,000 denarii. Remember how much a denarius is worth? 1 day's wages for a working man. That's right. So, with that analogy, this was almost 20,000 or 20 years worth of wages is what a talent is. 6,000 denarii, 1 day's versus 1 day's wage. 6,000 denarii equals 1 talent, which is what, almost 20 years worth of wages. We're talking a lot of money. One guy got 5 talents, 20 years. That's like 100 years of wages. The other one got 2, the other one got 1. Tremendous amount of money. The man who received 5 talents went at once, put money in the work, and gained 5. They all went and invested the 5 talents. The guy invested his 2 talents. What did the guy with 1 talent do? Buried it. He didn't choose the gift that was given to him. He buried it. The other guys did. The guy with 5 talents doubled it. The guy with 2 talents doubled it. The guy with 1 talent dug it up and returned it. And Jesus wasn't so happy. The guy who returned the 5 and 2, Jesus said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." But the guy that didn't choose it, his talent, didn't waste it, didn't lose it, returned it, Jesus wasn't too happy with him. He says, "You wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I had not sown and gather where I had not scattered seed. You should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest." That was prior to the bank collapse that we had now. "Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he who has abundance, whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away." Dan uses this parable as an example that when we go to heaven, we're going to have jobs in heaven. And how we use the gifts and talents that God gives to us will determine what our jobs are going to be up in heaven when we get there. I remember hearing that. I'm like, wow, I've never heard that analogy before. Right after, he's talking about heaven. Right after that parable. Okay. The ability to see needs and supplies which others tend to overlook. Number 7. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Pilate ordered it given to him. Can you imagine going to Pilate and asking for Jesus' body? You know he was rich. You know he had to be powerful. He may even have been in the Sanhedrin at one time. We don't know that for sure. But The pilot said yes, he gave him the body. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, placed it in his own tomb, had it cut out of rock, was in his own tomb, rolled a big stone in front of the entrance of the tomb, and he went away. The ability to see needs and supplies which others tend to overlook. Number 8, he desired to use giving as a way to motivate others to give, not out of manipulation, which, boy, can be done a lot, but out of a desire to minister. And I was doing really good up until I got to the last one. I was thinking, well, I got, spiritual, maybe, but then I saw number 9. The keen ability to discern wise investments in order to have more money available to give away. All I got to do is look at my statements for the last couple of years, when the recession started, and how we all got nailed. Well, maybe it wasn't such a, I didn't get close.